Now, institutionalized false prophetic movements, of course, are part of this system. If this is true, if Protestant America, with all its religious affiliations, represents this beast, then there will be many false prophets. So the term false prophet may apply to individuals, but also to institutions. In the days before Protestantism, there was largely only one false prophet as institution, namely Rome. But when Protestants split into factions and manifested the same spirit of persecution towards those that differed from them as Rome had done, well, then there were suddenly many false prophets. And when Jesus in Matthew 24:11 said, "And many false prophets shall arise and shall deceive many," and in 1 John 4:1, "Beloved, believe not every spirit." Watch out for false spirits. Try the spirits. How do you try the spirits? By the word. Whether they are of God, because many false prophets are going out into the world. These are institutionalized false prophets, prophetic movements, preaching movements. Prophecy means also to preach. So these are churches that are preaching false doctrine, and they are the daughters of the beast, of Rome. Jeremiah 51:9, "We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her, and let us go everyone into his own country, for her judgment reaches unto heaven and is lifted up unto the skies." That was typical Babylon. An anti-typical Babylon, spiritual Babylon, will have the same criteria, and you have to forsake her. You have to get out of her. So Revelation 19:20, "And the beast was taken, and the false prophet that wrought the miracles before him, with which he had deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped its image. These both were cast into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone." So these religious systems will be destroyed. And this is a serious issue, because how many millions of people? No, let's rephrase that. Billions of people.
False prophets? Seriously? Walter, you guys are the last people that should be talking about false prophets. I'm always stultified when you guys say stuff like this. Beware of false prophets. You mean like William Miller? Who you guys have tried to rebrand as being remembered as a reformer to try and wax over the fact that he was a false prophet? You mean like Ellen White, who falsely claimed to be shown the day and hour of Jesus' return over 7 times, who claimed she was told by God that the 1843 Miller chart wasn't to change and it changed 3 times, who claimed that the sun went black on May 19, 1780, and that the stars fell from heaven on November 13, 1833, supposedly fulfilling Revelation 6:12 through 13 and Matthew 24:29. Yet it was a smoke cloud from the fires in Canada and a recurring meteor shower that happens every 90 years or so due to modern science discovering it? Who claimed to be shown by God that the holy kiss that Paul signs off with in a number of his epistles was to be practiced as a normative recurring ordinance for the Christian church, and it was a result of Antichrist that it had been lost. Yet in the July 16, 1957 issue of the Youth's Instructor, an official publication of your church, they claim that despite the holy kiss being found throughout Paul's epistles, there is no evidence of these injunctions being a universal, or that these injunctions were to be universal in practice by the church until the return of Christ. You mean like the failed Chicago building vision? You mean like the shut door of salvation that then opened and shut again and then squeaked open and then closed, but a new one opened? None of which were conditional prophecies that you guys like to always try and use as the scapegoat? No pun intended. You mean the same woman that stole the words of others, tried passing them off as coming from God, which God explicitly states in the same Jeremiah you quoted from, but in chapter 23, calling these people lying prophets, where God says in part, quote, "I'm against the prophets who steal from one another words supposedly from me. Yes, declares the Lord, I'm against the prophets who wag their own tongues and yet declare, the Lord declares. Indeed, I'm against those who prophesy false dreams, declares the Lord. They tell them and lead my people astray with their reckless lies. Yet I did not send or appoint them. They did not benefit these people in the least, declares the Lord. Sir, you guys are the last movement that needs to be warning anybody about false prophets. Put your pointer finger down, sir. Your lack of self-awareness is mind-boggling. And I'm not defending the individuals you mentioned either. But you guys are constantly caught in the hypocritical catch-22. You point the finger at kooky modern charismatic movements, like you're going to do in a little bit, yet you guys have the same nonsense in your own midst, codified in the fundamental beliefs. You said we're to try the spirits by the word. I agree. That's what Scripture says. Your guys' prophetess doesn't even come close. Not even a question. You guys can go check out the funeral stream for that from a few months back. Not going to open that can of worms again, but my goodness, Walter, smell the roses, my man. Again, we get a taste of the abuse of Scripture. Walter, contextually, 1 John is referring to Gnostic heretics that were creeping into the church. John is not writing his epistle referring to institutionalized prophetic movements rising up. It could apply to them, but there's never any mention of any of this stuff. Nothing about the backstory. None of that stuff matters. Just cite a verse here, cite a verse there, hopscotch through the Bible, and just weave this stuff together. It's people like your prophetess that we're supposed to all of a sudden believe and accept as a part of these mutually supportive clusters of doctrines that come from this great controversy theme that we have to accept to be saved. And if you're wondering why I get worked up, it's because millions of people are listening to this stuff, swallowing it, hook, line, and sinker, being led astray. Yeah, I don't particularly care for that, folks. Scripture calls believers to hate what God hates. I don't hate this man. He isn't my enemy, like I said earlier. I'm sure he genuinely believes this stuff. But that doesn't mean it's not deception. Millions of people are caught up in Adventism with a false Christ and a false gospel, neither of which can save. And you're worried about everyone else?